In Pillars, a really important topic as a leader is how you reconcile people. I have heard so many leaders make this statement: ministry would be so easy if it wasn't for people. I've made that statement. You've probably made that statement. But the reality is, leadership and ministry is all about people. And people are human, and our humanity sets in, so there is a brokenness and there is a conflict. And yet that conflict is not just a problem to be solved. It's a tremendous opportunity to experience the gospel, to experience the power of the Holy Spirit. But it's a moment when there is a breakdown in relationships for a leader to stand up and understand the pattern and the purpose behind why God has instructed us to be leaders who involve ourselves in reconciliation, not just avoidance or not just moving them away, but actually seeing this is a great opportunity. Most of us can relate to Peter when he came to Jesus with a very specific question in Matthew chapter 18. He says this in verse 21. Then Peter came to Jesus and asked, "Lord, how many times should I forgive my brother or sister who sins against me? Up to 7 times. Jesus answered, I tell you, not 7 times, but 77 times. Do you see what Peter asks? How many times? Usually when there is a breakdown in relationship, it's not just a one-time event. It's an ongoing event. It goes on for weeks or even months, and you go, how long do I have to put up with this person? How long do I have to put up with this abuse? And Peter describes the person as a brother and sister, because relational breakdown is rarely by a stranger. I don't really care what people may post about me on social media who I don't know. But when it's a friend, a member of my church, a brother or sister, that's when I care. That's when it really hurts. And Peter says, listen, how long do I have to put up with somebody close to me who is really hurting me? Relational breakdown is not about a concept or an idea or of a difference of opinion about a strategy. It's a genuine interpersonal conflict. And we can all relate to Peter, who brings this question to Jesus as a leader, saying, how do I deal with this? What do I do with this? And Jesus' response to Peter is how to lead reconciliation. And the importance of it is reconciliation is a way in which people discover an insight into the gospel. Jesus reconciled us to him. He has made us ambassadors of reconciliation. And that's not just the lost to becoming saved, but it is also Christians understanding grace at a deeper way. And when there's an interpersonal breakdown, we need to follow the pattern that Jesus has given us as leaders so that those Christians can grow to a greater understanding of grace and the gospel, and then they will carry themselves in a healthier, better way as part of your ministry. So Jesus is very precise and very practical in his teaching as to how we lead reconciliation. It's a pattern that I think, honestly, many of us don't follow to the degree of specificity that Jesus gives that we should. This pattern is given in Matthew chapter 18. Here's what Jesus says to Peter and to us. If your brother or sister sins against you, go privately and point out the offense. If the other person listens and confesses it, you have won them back. But if you are unsuccessful, take 1 or 2 others with you and go back again, so that every matter may be established by 2 or 3 witnesses. If the person still refuses to listen, tell it to the church. Then if they won't accept the church's decision, treat that person as a sinner or a tax collector. Now, when Jesus gives these directives, it's important that we don't treat them too rigidly or legalistically. It's like he's giving us 4 dimensions, and there is a sequence to them, but don't be so rigid. The point of these directives in Jesus telling Peter, the ultimate point is not Peter's vindication. It's not, Peter, here's how you can feel better about yourself. It's not, hey, Peter, here's how you can be justified in the wrong that was done to you. The point is very clear. Hey, Peter, as a leader, here's how you can bring restoration to that person who has treated you wrong. And as leaders, we follow Jesus' pattern because it's an opportunity, a moment to bring restoration and healing to the person who has treated us wrong. And that's why this pattern becomes so important. Jesus begins by telling us, listen, when somebody does wrong, Go to them, one-to-one. Don't run to others. Don't spread this out to everybody. Don't gossip about it. Do not avoid the situation. When somebody has done wrong, see this as a moment, and Jesus is very clear, go privately to them so that you go to them. You don't want their reputation ruined. You don't want people to be thinking badly about them. We want to restore them, and if it can be done privately, all the better, because he says you're going to do this to win them back. Now, notice in his directions, he says the initiative, Peter, is on you. Oftentimes as leaders, when somebody hurts us, we put the initiative on them. When they come to me and apologize, when they come to me and ask for forgiveness, and Jesus goes, no, our leadership ministry is to see them restored, so we're going to go to them. It's what Jesus did for us. When we hurt him, when we wronged him, when we were sinful to him, he didn't wait. He came to us. And so when somebody has hurt you, it's important to see they're the purpose of this. I was talking to a leader one time, and he said, when people speak wrongly about me, when they gossip, when they seemingly say something that could offend, it doesn't bother me. It doesn't bother me at all. So I have no issues with this. He missed the point of this teaching. The point of this teaching is not, if this bothers you, here's how you heal yourself. The point of this teaching is not, don't let it bother you. The point of this teaching is when you are hurt by somebody, when somebody behaves interpersonally in a way that is wrong, there is an opportunity for them to be healed, to win them back. So the first thing you do is you go one-to-one. Now, Jesus is a realist, and he realizes that there are some people where they're at, and you go and you talk to them, and you do that in a way full of grace to bring restoration, and it's not going to work. They're not going to respond, and probably many of us have had that experience. And when that happens to us, then we kind of quit. There's no resolution. Jesus has still 3 more strategies for us to follow. The next one, he says, listen, take a few people and go to them. Go few to one. No longer one-to-one, but few to one. Now, he is not saying gang up on them. You become the majority. Now you have 5 of you who are saying what they do is wrong. He's not saying, this is about ganging up and showing them and getting justice for yourself. He uses this phrase where he says, every matter can be established. What Jesus is saying is, hey, Peter, hey, you as a leader, grab a few more trusted, wise people to look in on this issue so you can actually get to the truth of it, so every matter can be established. I think Jesus is actually telling Peter, have some humility here, Peter. You may not be seeing it clearly. You may not be seeing it exactly as it's supposed to be. We need others oftentimes when, as a leader, we are helping to bring about reconciliation. Because if we've been hurt, if we are emotionally affected by this, we may not have a clear view, and we need that humility. There's a wonderful verse in Psalm 85:10 that describes for us the roles that are necessary when Jesus says, hey, gather a few more people. Psalms 85:10 says this, mercy and truth meet together, justice and peace kiss each other. It's like the Bible is saying there are 4 roles that are necessary if you're actually going to bring about this reconciliation. And Jesus is saying, bring a few people that may represent these roles. You need mercy. There needs to be compassion that is present there. This is not just about justice, but you need truth. You have to get to what really happened, what was really said, and what was really wrong. You do need justice. There needs to be a validation of the harm that was done and the hurt that was done. But you need peace, which refers to the future and the hope of reconciliation. And Jesus says, Peter, have some humility that if you go one-to-one and it doesn't quite work, there may need to be a few more people who look in on this matter and represent compassion and the reality of what happened and justice and peace for the future. And when those roles are there, perhaps then you can see reconciliation take place. But Jesus also understands that that may not even be enough. You may go one-to-one and it doesn't work. You may even have a few trusted, wise voices speak into it, and there still isn't reconciliation. So then he says, listen, then you bring it in front of the church. Now understand what he's saying in that context. And now in our churches, many of our churches in many of our regions, they're highly institutional. Some of them are larger and they're very diverse. In the first century, the church was family. I mean, they were literally family, uncles and aunts, brothers and sisters. They knew each other. They met in homes. In some ways, what I think Jesus is saying is, Peter, go 1-to-1. If that doesn't work, go few to one. And if few to one doesn't work, go family to one. When Jesus says bring the church into it, he's not saying bring the moral police into it, bring the established moral police. He is not wanting us to alienate from the people who need to be healed and restored. He's saying bring the family into it. In your family, when there is conflict, how do you deal with it as a family? You come together as a family, brothers and sisters together. You try to talk about it as a family together. You treat conflict as a family. That is what Jesus is teaching Peter, and he's teaching us in bringing about relational reconciliation. You know, in the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve and the Lord were there, and they were present, and they blessed each other. They were together. And then sin came in, and there was relational breakdown, relational conflict. And instead of being present and blessing, they were now removed and hiding and blaming. Adam and Eve blamed each other. They even blamed the enemy. They blamed God. And oftentimes we see that characteristic when it comes to relational reconciliation. We used to present and bless. Now we're hiding and blaming. We have to get back to being present with each other and blessing each other. And to do that as a leader, I've got to lead that. And I'm going to go to you one-on-one in grace. And if that doesn't work, I'm going to have the humility to bring in some other trusted voices who may see it differently than I do. And maybe that'll bring about reconciliation. And if that doesn't work, then we're going to treat this as family. And we're going to sit down as family. And we're going to be present together as family. And we're going to create that kind of a family environment. We're going to hope that God will use that to bring about a reconciliation so the person who needs healing and restoration doesn't feel alienated, but feels loved and is in a position because of the kindness that leads to repentance to ask for forgiveness and be healed and be restored. But Jesus also is aware that there are some cases when even that won't work, where even that's not going to be a possibility. So he gives a fourth strategy. Now, I told you, strategy 1, 1-to-1, 2 is few to one, 3 is family to one. This fourth strategy, I call it grace to one. When you read it on the surface, it's easy to think that Jesus is saying, if they don't ask for repentance, if they're not willing to be reconciled, then kick them out. Finally, now you get what you want. They get discarded. I do not believe Jesus is teaching that. There are other verses in the Bible that talk about there are times when there is a need for a separation. This is not one of those passages. Here's why I think that. How did Jesus treat the tax collectors and the sinners? He ate with them. He sat with them. He did not discard them. He did not avoid them. He was together with them. When Jesus tells Peter, treat that person as a sinner, here's what I think he's actually saying. He's saying, listen, put reconciliation on hold until that person is at a place where they're able to engage it. It's like show unconditional love with boundaries, grace, until that person is ready for this. There may be some times when there has been a relational breakdown, and where that person is at, they do not currently have the capacity to come and receive grace and receive forgiveness and be reconciled. If you've gone 1-to-1 and few to one and family to one and none of that has worked, then you know what? Reconciliation may need to be put on hold for a little while. Treat that person as a sinner. Eat with them, love them, have no expectation on them for reconciliation in this moment. I call it unconditional love with boundaries. There may be boundaries based upon the nature of the breakdown, understood, and there's wisdom in that. But I don't think Jesus is saying discard them. The goal is to win them back. And sometimes that can be done fairly immediately. And sometimes that takes a little bit of time. And we need to have the grace and the authority as a leader to allow that. When I was pastoring, one time somebody really treated me wrong, spoke wrongly against me, and it really hurt me. And I knew this pattern that I was supposed to carry it out, but it was hard. It was hard to carry it out. I didn't want to do it. And I remember my wife making this statement to me that really stuck with me for many, many years of ministry since then. She said, "Joel, what are you missing from Jesus that makes you not want to see this person restored who has hurt you?" And it really challenged me as a leader. When you are leading in the kingdom and in the church, people will hurt you. There will be hard times. There will be interpersonal conflict against you at times. And that's a moment for an image of the gospel to come forward, to be an ambassador of reconciliation. That's why Jesus treats this so critically, so importantly for Peter. When Peter comes to Jesus like we do, and he asks this question, how long do I have to put up with this person who is really sinning against me? And Jesus says, be a leader and follow this pattern. Do you believe in the gospel? Do you believe in the power of the gospel to change lives? Because it is when there is a relational breakdown that the truth of the gospel sometimes is most tested. And it begins by our leadership. And we need to find in Jesus and in our relationship with him the grace and the love and the strength and the affirmation and the acceptance that we need so that we can unconditionally go one-to-one, go few to one, go family to one, and if necessary, go grace to one. Here's how Paul wrote it in Colossians chapter 3, verse 12. Therefore, as God's chosen people, holy and dearly loved, clothe yourself with compassion, kindness, humility, gentleness, and patience. Bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. Forgive as the Lord forgave you. And over all these virtues, put on love, which binds them together in perfect unity. Let the peace of Christ rule in your hearts, since as members of one body, you were called to peace. Do you truly believe the gospel? Then as a leader, follow the pattern of Jesus. And know that as you reach out to bring about relational reconciliation, you will find in Jesus all you need for your heart and your soul that will enable you to unconditionally be an ambassador of reconciliation and bring that person back to healing and health and restoration.